As the world rang in the new year, a Chinese and Russian-led group of emerging economies welcomed several new members. Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Ethiopia have officially become the newest members of Brics. The addition of Tehran was a surprise to many, especially owing to its long-standing rivalry with both Abu Dhabi and Riyadh. Though all sides have been trying to mend ties recently, the alliance has also managed to bring together Egypt and Ethiopia, another pair mired in a dispute over the flow of the Nile River. With the latest additions, Brics now consists of 10 states. Formed in 2009, the original members, Brazil, Russia, India and China, later added South Africa in 2010. The group's main objective has been to boost economic cooperation and trade among member countries. But many have called the bloc the biggest geopolitical rival to the G7, a group of advanced economies. The addition of traditionally strong Western allies like Egypt, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have boosted those claims. Last year, Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, called on Brics nations to create a common currency, which could dethrone the US dollar's dominance and its ability to unilaterally impose economic sanctions. And to further discuss the enlargement of Brics, joining me from New Delhi is Anil Trigunayat. He's a former Indian ambassador who has served across the Middle East, and from Abu Dhabi, Suha Çubukçuoğlu, a senior fellow at Trends Research. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Anil, Brics has doubled in size in less than 2 decades since its founding. What's the main driving force behind this largest and latest expansion?
Well, I think that the biggest driving force is its economic heft that this organization over a short time has been able to garner. Secondly, as we see, there is a greater emphasis in the way the global landscape is changing, geopolitical landscape is changing, that there is a much greater emphasis on diversifying the relationships, going into unilaterals, multilaterals, plurilateral arrangements. And I think the Brics is seen as a good alternative, which is mutually beneficial. Therefore, there has been a tremendous interest. And if I am to recall what President Putin recently said, who is currently holding the chair, he said that there are about 30 more countries that are waiting to be in the pipeline. And it does represent about 40% of the global population and more than a quarter of the GDP, and which is also growing because the pivot is moving towards the south. And therefore, I think that this has acquired a tremendous heft.
So, Suha, what do you make of the organization's composition, since it includes key players in the Middle East that are traditionally U.S. allies?
Sure. I think this is a major win for China that pushed for expansion, because it wants to turn the Brics into a sort of a counterweight against the G7 group of developed nations. For Gulf countries, establishing stronger connections with India and China goes beyond, I would say, adjusting in global positioning or repositioning and broadening their network of diplomatic partners, but it also opens up opportunities for expansion, particularly as a trade hub. And the membership also provides a significant advantage by fostering non-oil trade with fellow members, and especially in areas such as healthcare, education, and tourism, to boost their non-oil exports. Now, with Gulf countries gaining increased access to Africa through Ethiopia, Egypt, and South Africa, and solidifying their role as the primary hub for China's Belt and Road Initiative in the Middle East, their effort to promote coordination of investment policies and cross-border transactions, especially in the context of Africa, can contribute to sustainable development, especially in climate adaptation and mitigation, which was a hot topic just less than a month ago at the COP28 summit in Dubai.
So, Anil, could Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the Gulf's two biggest and financial heavyweights and the world's largest energy suppliers, could help China and Russia challenge the U.S. influence?
Well, overall, what we are witnessing today is that there is a polarization heading more towards a Cold War 2.0 kind of scenario, in my view. And therefore, these multilateral groupings which are emerging can provide some kind of a leeway and, in my view, a hiatus to a complete polarization. No doubt that China and Russia would seek, as may like to see it as more as an anti-Western or to contain the Western hegemony. I mean, that is something that they're looking at. But since there are many countries, it's not only those two powers, there are other countries, India, and now there are Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others, who also have a very different kind of a policy, which generally aligns with the strategic autonomy. Now, in the West Asia, I mean, Middle East, Saudi Arabia and UAE are the two major powers who have just become the members, so has Iran and Egypt. Now,
Yes.
all these four powers bring a lot on the table, and there will be many more which will be interested in joining it eventually. And these countries have, especially the oil-rich countries, have converted their policies more towards Act East. And with Act East, they are really going to their markets and getting more engaged with them, since United States itself has become a competitor as far as hydrocarbons are concerned to them.
So, Suha, another oil-rich country, Iran. Iran's supreme leader has called its Brics membership a strategic victory for his country. So how would that change Tehran's international standing, and what does Tehran stand to gain from this membership?
I think it would gain on two fronts, clearly. One is to gain increased legitimacy despite domestic unrest. And two is to do more trade with growing economies of the global south. So its main trade partners are in Eurasia rather than in the West, as we know, due to sanctions, the nuclear power or nuclear energy related sanctions imposed on Iran for years. So what it's looking is to diversify away from dollar-based trade, what is termed as de-dollarization, and increase its trade volume with and partnerships through diversification and income via different foreign currencies. Now, that's a long-term task because still US dollar dominates international financial transactions, as we know. But it's a major morale boost for Tehran. So it increases their legitimacy in the eyes of many countries in the global south, especially in G7, spearheaded by China. So it stands to gain both in terms of its nation branding and access to alternative markets and to draw investment from other countries.
So Egypt and Ethiopia have long-standing disputes over a dam project on the Nile River. So why did Brics choose to admit two countries that many say could go to war in the future?
Well, hopefully when these countries are part of this and their main objective is economic integration, because no wars are permanent in that sense of the term, and hopefully these two countries should be able to work out some kind of a modus vivendi that is expected. And I think the other countries in the grouping are also equally interested that this thing does not conflict further between the two. So when they are part of this grouping, there is obviously a chance that things might not go out of hand as far as their own internal bilateral problems are concerned.
So Brics countries, on the other hand, have economies that are vastly different in scale and governments with very divergent foreign policy goals. Is this a complicating factor for the bloc's consensus decision-making model?
Yes, it is, exactly, yeah. So because there is no central authority, a Brics secretariat, so to say, there is lack of coordination and, different agendas and priorities. And we see this in, for instance, discussions on de-dollarization and common currency debates. For instance, how to create a Brics currency, perhaps a gold-backed currency at some point down in the future, but it's still in very much a debate discussion phase rather than anything in reality. Some people call it more of a talk shop or something that is nice to come together and give a group photo, but not offering much in substance. That's not true. So Brics has some economic weight. And as the ambassador kindly also explained, it has grown in size economically, and it's actually bigger now in purchasing power parity terms, GDP-wise, than G7. So despite differing priorities, agendas, and lack of teeth, let's say, or the power to sort of influence geopolitical events around the globe, it still has some weight because it's part of this wider trend of the shifting center of economic gravity from the West, from the Euro-Atlantic to the Asia-Pacific or the Indo-Pacific. So it's a great effort for nation branding, but also a promising body that, if it gains traction to sort of have a more substantial body, a governing body, a coordinating body, that will also beef up, put more beef around the bone in the new development bank, then it will become a more prominent force in shaping the debate and bringing the agenda or the interests of the global south into a more central place in the world agenda.
So the new development bank was founded in 2015. How has it evolved in the past decade? And will it become a serious rival to Western-led institutions like the World Bank and IMF?
Well, it is, in my view, at this stage, it is not a big threat, but it is definitely some kind of additionality or an alternative where the loans can be extended on more compassionate prices, which does not follow I would say, the dictum of the Bretton Woods institutions that one size fits all, the kind of conditionalities that are imposed. And now with UAE, Saudi Arabia, and some other countries joining it, I think their financial base will also be increased significantly, which will add to their lending capacity. So I don't see it emerging as just immediately an alternative, but as India under its G20 presidency was greatly focused on the reforms of the multilateral development banks and others, I think that this will at least provide some kind of incentive for those organizations to reform. If they don't reform, then, as they say, there is going to be an alternate. And as my friend said about this, the weaponization of financial instruments by the United States in recent times has really caused a tremendous worry and an anxiety across the world. Therefore, there's a discussion. More and more countries are now talking of transacting in their national currencies. India has already signed up with more than 18, 20 countries. China is another major one. Russia is doing that. Many other countries are doing it. And I think people prefer to do that.
All right, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.